You're welcome back. Thank you for joining us. It is a live brand daybreak. Moving on to the focus for this morning, we're panning it on the education system. And of course, a significant upturn in tuition and other fees have been implemented by several educational institutions. A consequence of course, the subsidy removal on petrol. This development is causing financial strain for parents as they prepare for the forthcoming school season. Of course, a new session will be coming up. The federal government, through the Federal Ministry of Education, announced a substantial review of school fees for new students in its secondary schools. Private school owners in the country have also declared that the effects of the recent fuel subsidy removal by the federal government on their cost of operation may push them to also increase their school fees prices. And of course, to have this conversation, joining us in the studio this morning is Mr. Hassan Taiwo Soweto. He is an education rights campaigner. Good morning, Hassan. You're welcome.
Good morning to you. Thanks for having me. Good morning.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Let's start off this way. Let's look at the surge in tuition fees. Tuition fees has been very unusual in Nigeria. Why I say unusual is because the tradition that you get in elsewhere, I mean, more developed climes where, you know, the government tries to make it easy for you to be able to afford and pay school fees. We don't really get a lot of that here. If your parents are not able to afford school fees, you probably just won't have to go to school. Except, of course, as a young person, you're able to hustle, like we say it, and put yourself through school. And the situation, unfortunately, seems to look like it's getting worse because, you know, looking at the current economic realities that we're currently living on in the country, and the upsurge in school fees and tuition, of course, emanating from the current removal of subsidy on petrol products and every other effect it's having on the economy. Schools, government-owned, planning review on tuition, private-owned institutions as well, looking at doing the same thing, and it just keeps going higher. How do you react to all this?
Well, it's inevitable. I mean, because like you rightly said, it's a direct consequence, you know, of the neoliberal attacks on the Nigerian people, the economic policies of fuel subsidy removal, of devaluation of the naira, means that the production cost of every organization, including academic centers, has increased exponentially. Even in the home, the living condition, the process of feeding and of meeting basic needs has increased exponentially, and that also means that it is, you know, putting a lot of pressure, you know, on schools, and that is what has led to this. But then I'd like to make some clarifications. First is that the federal government has come out to say that they still maintain the policy of tuition free in federal institutions, so that what is being increased now across public tertiary institutions are not tuition fee as such, but rather miscellaneous charges for ICT, for hostel accommodation, for admission, for accommodation, and all of that. But where that becomes problematic is that at the end of the day, you know, when you look at the quantum of the fees that are being increased now, the level it is now, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter whether you, whatever name you call it. What is clear to an average student and working class parent who have to struggle to meet the cost of education now is that they have to cough out hundreds of thousands of naira just for a child to go through school. And it doesn't have to be like this. Like my organization has consistently argued, Nigeria is too rich, enormously wealthy, you know, to provide for education, to invest adequately in the funding of public education to the extent that people don't have to pay anything at all. Free, functional education is possible in this country on the basis of the resources that exist, despite what has been called the difficult economic environment, the amount of resources and wealth that still exists in the country, and how do you know? What happened a few weeks ago, a few days ago, at the National Assembly, where the Senate President, why not knowing it was on camera, announced that a sum of money was going to be sent to the account of a lawmaker to assist them in enjoying their holidays, is a clear example that this economic catastrophe, this crash in living condition that affects all of us, only affects a certain layer of people in this country, that is the working class, the poor, those who have to struggle to survive. But for the politicians and for the rich, it doesn't get them. They still continue to exist in that opulence, using the collective resources and wealth of this country. We have seen the enormous and huge motorcade of the president each time he goes out. This is the president who is asking the rest of us to tighten our belts because we've got to pay more for fuel and other things because of the situation of the economy. But the motorcade is as long as 100 cars. It still maintains the same fleet of aircraft that the Buhari government left. The same government at that time, which in 2015 was so critical of the PDP government for their wastage. And the problem is that once they get into power, they were going to reduce the presidential fleet. They didn't do that for 8 years. And the current government has also continued with the same. So at the end of the day, what is happening in this country is that, the ruling elite are trying to impose very terrible, very atrocious neoliberal economic policies that will only continue, to put our people in crisis. And part of the manifestations of that is what is happening in the education sector. And what we have to say is that we've got to fight back.
Good. We
must not accept this whole idea that we have to tighten up. There's no belt to tighten in the real sense of the word.
Maintaining the focus, which is education, we have established that what is going on right now is a direct consequence of the fuel subsidy removal. I mean, our economy is built around petrol. So when petrol sneezes, everybody gets a cold. Good. And that is what is going on right now in the education sector. I want us to look at the effect it's going to have on higher institutions, because you did mention that in your initial analysis. Looking at the higher education system in Nigeria, there has been conversations from several quarters claiming that, first of all, there needs to be a rejigging of the entire system. I want to get your reaction to that. But before then, let us also see how you react to the new policy by the new presidency. I mean, about the student loan. We've heard that it is part of, their plans to assuage, or should I say, ameliorate the situation for people. Do you see I mean that student loan situation? Is it feasible to you? How do you react to everything surrounding that conversation?
When it comes to the feasibility, it's a different question altogether. Because the first thing is that policy itself is completely unreasonable.
Why do you say that?
Because it's based on false premises. The first false premise that it's based upon is that the country does not have enough resources to fund education. The same country that funded education at different points in history, especially that time when the current people in government were young like the rest of us and had to go to school. This same country could fund education at that time. But now they say that that country does not have enough resources to do that anymore, despite what we know in terms of size of the economy, the wealth that exists, and everything. That's the first false, because it's false. It's not true. And I've tried to explain that before. The second false premise is that it gives the impression that we have in this country, mass of people who can be able to service such a loan and pay back as at when due.
You don't think that's true?
It's not true.